before putting stuff in there. There's a light control feature phone. You don't even have to hit all the lines you put down, but just, a few to get it just that kind of, just until you're happy with it. And then once you hit it with a heat gun, you're going to find that the foam will open up and it'll give you that, it'll give you a really wonderful texture to start your base coat with. So we have a couple pieces up here. We've got,
Okay, so the next thing is doing fake leather, and I should have brought some of it up here, but I've done a few chest plates out of thin foam. We use a very dense thin foam called from TNT Cosplay Supply called EVA 70, but you can also do it with normal EVA foam. It just isn't quite as rigid. So to get a good leather texture, the way that we generally do it is we'll take just a piece of aluminum foil, ball it up, and then you heat that up with your heat gun. Make sure you're in an oven mitt. Nobody wants to burn their palms off. But go ahead and heat that up, and then just press that into the foam and do it over and over and over again, and it creates a great fake leather texture. And by all means, guys, do you have anything you want to add?
Another use for that really dense, thin foam is it's actually sewable. So it's really great for if you actually have to attach something small to your costume. I have this elbow patch. I literally cut out the shape I wanted, and sewed it down to the foam, and then glued another foam piece to that, so that it actually has a lot of durability and won't just pop off straight up through your arm. So that's another use for that really dense foam TNT cosplay.
All right, and this is one that kind of everybody has, I think, a different technique here for, but metals, things like that, to get that nice smooth thing, is it's a big part where painting is going to come in, because a lot of costumes and a lot of things that all of us work with are supposed to look like various kinds of metal, be it old medieval armor that's supposed to look hammer forged, or things like that, things that you want to have a nice smooth machine look to, or such. And so the first, these two here, if you want to get a hammered metal looking texture, a great way to do that is to take, most Dremel kits come with a round stone bit. If you put that in your Dremel and just go and hit your piece kind of randomly all over the place with that round stone bit, it'll bite into it just enough to create a good hammered metal look, instead of it looking like it's a new flush piece. And so for things like medieval armors or things that would have been hammer forged, that's a great way to be able to create that look and impression. For a lot of the filigrees and stuff that I personally do, we'll go over those by just doing thin strips of EVA foam, cut into a triangle, and I'll just glue them into place.
For things that aren't like a finished metal or like a medieval knight metal, kind of more like for this, for example, I wanted like a robotic metal, but it looks like it's been heavily used. So I just do a nice metallic paint job on it, and then you go through and add the weathering after you get that base coat. So I'll take like a sponge brush and dab coppers on it. So it looks like it's starting to rust, and then go through and take like silver edging around the edges, so it looks like it's seen a lot of scrapes and stuff like that. So it's not going to look like a nice metal, it's going to look more like a feature, like a car metal or a robot, and even like an automotive metallic thing for that. I do that base, and then I go in and dab the coppers. Yeah, I use my fingers sometimes, kind of get like a natural, like kind of rub it on there. So it gives a different look.
One method I have not personally tried, but we had a contest with someone who wanted this method, and it's something new I've never heard of. Plastic is a really common sealer for foam, and they actually produce a glossifier, which I have not heard of until recently.
That's actually the right word to finish that.
Yeah.
It's a great plastic glossifier.
It creates a smoother surface than just plastic dip alone, because plastic dip can get sort of like a bubbly orange peel texture sometimes. It's like this, I wish I knew about the glossifier personally, it's not as smooth and metallic as I'm hoping for it, but I still feel like I was able to get the metallic tone across just by the use of metallic paint, and then the silver brushing to make it look like it's been dinged and hit several times.
Yeah, now we can go ahead. And we're all here to help answer questions and discuss, and I apologize to you guys, we haven't actually rehearsed this, so it's kind of at the moment, but like I said, everybody up here is an expert at what we do, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. We all use different techniques, and we all kind of felt like having a variety of opinions and a variety ability to answer would make this a more worthwhile, question and answer session and panel for you guys. Now, to create skin, I don't know if any of you guys were here yesterday to see my big green super mutant that I had on, but the way that I've done that, this is something that I learned from SKS Props, is to get that skin texture, we took just some cheap fleece, laid it down over our build, and then we sprayed that with some spray adhesive. We used some 3M Spray 90. We took just masked latex on a spare piece of upholstery foam and just dabbed that on it, which created that kind of poured texture and helped to get a good realistic skin look and feel to the piece.
On that same method, if you were looking for something that's maybe just a touch smoother, for a good portion of the skin we went through and put that fleece with the heat gun, just take a little soft fuzzy bits off of the tool to take it through.
Yeah, this is a good example of that technique. These are both built by SKS Props. He is a phenomenal builder, and this is that's the technique that he used on both of these. All right, so the next thing, before we get to actually talking a lot about painting, while we're still kind of on finishing and things like that and getting textures, is I always recommend use things that you have. Think about what can be repurposed. One of my favorites that I use in a lot of my armor is googly eyes. They make great rivets and bolts.
All the rivets on the shield. I took a picture before I painted it, like 9 eyes in there.
Yeah, and so instead of reinventing the wheel, it's always a good idea to think about what you've got out there that's going to work. Googly eyes work awesome on our toothless build that we did. All of the scaling on the front of the face is puffy paint. Our super mutant, the veins, we just took some strips of yarn, rolled them in latex, and laid them on there so that they'd stand up as veins. And so think about what you've got that has the look that you're going for as you're trying to create, extra pieces and finishes.
Something else kind of along the lines, complex shapes can be really daunting. I actually started this build and put it off for like 6 months because I couldn't wrap my mind around the shape of my setup. Overwatch specifically has a lot of shapes. A really great way I've discovered to kind of get past that block of like thinking about that 3D shape is to build something you know. So I started off with like a foam vest that fit me and like would be in the general like size that I wanted to fit me really well. And then I knew she had circle buttons, so I just decided on the size and put the circle down, and then I took paper and just started taping it in places and trying to get the shape I want, and then pulled it all off, laid it flat, and traced that as my pattern. It was a lot easier to place pieces than try to like throw one huge piece, try to wrap my mind around like getting those exact angles first.
So here's some examples of our toothless and stuff like that. And now I think we're kind of into what everybody's hopefully here for. We're actually going to talk about different paint jobs and things like that they can do. But the first thing is, I recommend anytime that you're going to try to paint something, that you put down some kind of a sealant or a primer. With EVA foam, it's very important that you seal that with, plastic dip, latex, whatever you're using, so that your paint doesn't just soak into it and it just looks like a painted piece of foam. Anytime that you're painting any kind of a plastic or something like that, you need to put down a primer of some sort so that your paint can stick to it well.
And before you plastic proof it, working with foam, generally you want to run a heat gun across it. All kinds of foam, 50 millimeter. Once you run the heat gun across it, you'll see it gets kind of glittery, and that means you're trying to put a heat seal. And what I actually generally do is I heat seal it twice. So heat the whole thing up, it gets kind of a glittery look to it, and then I'll work on something else a little bit, give it 3 or 4 minutes. I'll go back and heat seal it again, and then I would plastic it. That heat seal it gives it a lot more stiffness, because it's very durable compared to a lot of other people with super foam, and so that's important. You want to hold up angles threads. Like I get in and out far out of this, I'm like crushing this thing, but it folds over the phone, so that took a lot of time to make sure it's really solidified before I painted it.
I just have a question.
Actually, I tried to make a set of elf ears a couple of months ago for Halloween, and I did this my first time dealing with the latex. And I was wondering if you guys had any tips because I watched several videos and I tried several times and several different types of molds that were made out of different materials. What I found is that the latex would always look bumpy and like pockets after I was done pieces of the mold.
Yeah, and unfortunately what that probably is air pockets. that have gotten in there. And in order to get rid of those, you can try pouring it from a very high position in a thin stream, and that'll help some. But the only way to really get rid of it is to use a degassing chamber.
You can also, as a parent, if you have like a washing machine that rattles and shakes a lot, place the mold on top of that as it's curing, and it will vibrate, and it will actually get some of the worst air bubbles out.
Thank you.
So here we are on different kinds of paint. Now, there's a billion kinds of paint on the market, and so we can't cover all of them, but I think we're going to just kind of talk about what most of us use. I think most of us use acrylic.
I use red paint. I used a spray paint base for this, but it was already this is a Nerf gun mod, so it was already a hard, smooth plastic. Rattle cans, unfortunately, have a lot of chemical reactions associated. You get like cracking and orange peeling if you layer them. So they're kind of risky.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, acrylic paint. The big thing there is most of our builds and things that we do generally are done with acrylic paints because they're durable, they're inexpensive, and they're reliable. Like Rachel was saying, with spray paints and things like that, there's nothing worse than to be laying down spray paint and then a minute later your piece has this crazy orange peeled grid on it that popped up, and now you've got to sand everything off and start over again. You don't have to worry about that with acrylic paints, which is nice. Plus, they tend to be a little more flexible, so as your piece bends, it doesn't get those crinkling marks and things like that as you tend to get with spray paints. The downside to acrylics is that you do have to be careful to get it smooth, even coat, to make sure you're not getting brush strokes on things and whatnot.
I actually use an airbrush. If you mix acrylic with a thinner, there are different airbrush thinners that you can use. Like I use a Create Text thinner personally. You mix it with the right, I use a airbrush. But you can actually put it through an airbrush, and then you don't worry about brush strokes at all.
Yeah, and I do the same thing. I actually use Windex for my thinner.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. Try that.
But I'll spray it through an air gun, or I've got an air-powered sprayer like you paint a car with or stuff like that I'll go over pieces with to help.
I don't have an airbrush. I'm on budget. I use a lot of the squishy brushes.
Oh yeah, the foam brushes.
The foam brushes,
Sponge
the
brushes.
foam dab brushes, you can buy them like $1 for $6. I go through a lot of them, a whole lot, and I use and that's for the bulk of the painting. And to get it where it doesn't look like I have brush strokes, a lot of layers. So I do one solid layer, gold, and then let it dry. I get it painted, but you gotta wait and then paint something else with it. Another layer. Well, I get to get a solid color where it doesn't look like strokes, about 4 to 5 layers of paint. And then once that's fully dry, and I've done some of the weathering, like the cuts, and I actually do my big stroke before I do my cuts. I use black foam too, so it's kind of make it pop and I know what I paint. But then I go in with my hand brushes, and I'll actually paint the black down in there, and I'll add some stuff you can see. And then I'll continue to paint with the silvers and stuff like that. And then I actually use a rubber bug, like a little black thing. On other stuff, like $5. Smallest amount of that wax, it goes a long way, and you use your little pellets to get like little scratches. It kind of pops more than the acrylic paints. So.
And we kind of covered a lot of this already, so I think we're good to skip airbrushing here. I'm sorry, like I said, we're kind of out of order and things, but go ahead. That's where this comes in. So we're talking about spray paints. They are a little bit risky. One thing, One thing with spray paints, and you can do this with any kind of non-water soluble paint, is a process called hydro dipping, where you'll take a big jug, a big tub of water, spray your things in here. So here we use gray, white, and black spray paints. Just spray some of one color into the water, then a little more into the center of that, and just kind of build those rings out. Let it kind of conglomerate together, and then you just shove the helmet or whatever piece you're doing down through that paint, kind of slosh it around to where it clears a hole in the center of your paint on top of the water, and pull it out, and you can get some good, cool effects that way. And that is done with spray paint, just because it was easy to not have to worry about fighting with oil paints or things like that. You can also buy hydro dipping films that work very well, but So there are techniques, and one thing that I stressed yesterday in my phone cooking down, there's no one perfect solution for everything. I can't go out and say, oh, I only use acrylic paints because we don't. We use a lot of different stuff. And unfortunately, there's no one solution that's always perfect. Rubber cement paints, this is one that we haven't talked about yet. I use a fair number of rubber cement paints because I do a lot of latex work and use latex to seal a lot of my foam. Rubber cement paints are a flexible paint made by mixing equal parts of naphtha and rubber cement and then then you mix oil paints in with that base to create your pigment. One thing there is naphtha is nasty stuff. It puts off some horrible fumes, so if you're doing this, make sure you're wearing proper safety equipment and in a well-ventilated area because it's not something you want to breathe. But the nice thing with rubber cement paints is they are extremely flexible. They're used for a lot of like latex masks and stuff. So you can take your piece and crumple it as much as you want, and you're not going to get any lines or creases or problems because it is very flexible. They also dry extremely quickly. Generally, rubber cement paint, from the point that you put your thin, brush of it down to when it's dried, is less than 30 seconds. And so you can do quick, elaborate paint jobs and details very easily. It can be, add a little bit extra naphtha and you can run it through an airbrush just fine and things like that. The downside is that it'll only bond to latex or rubber. If you try to put it down on plastic, it'll just rub right off. And I think Wes probably uses more than any of the rest of us. We'll let him talk about rub and buff.
Like I said earlier, you get a little bit of like flour, but all the rub and buff on this whole on the arm, highlights on it, highlights here, anything that's got silver, I use highlights on here. I have a lot of ones somewhere. And before I pick to use those, if I've gone through and put like a deep scratch in there, I'm like, okay, that doesn't feel like paint. It's a real item. And then things are kind of rub up again. So I kind of just have to think, what would scratch me? But I did all that with a small pink bottle of it goes a long way. It looks a little messy. The little gun finger kind of gets them off the turner finger and it's kind of there and you rub it. If you get too much, you can kind of actually buff it out. It's also about the purpose you want to put on and you can kind of buff it and kind of set it into it. Probably don't listen from there. You guys can go and take a close look after. It highlights the silver much brighter than the acrylic. Actually, the brightest silver acrylic I have, but when the acrylic dries, it kind of sets into color. The rub and buff really like it keeps that bright silver on.
Yes, and all of the highlighting on my Reinhardt here was also, all of the highlighting on Reinhardt here was done with rub and buff as well. I mean, it's a phenomenal product. All right, so let's talk a little bit about painting techniques. And here again, there's a million different ways to do this, and a lot to talk about. The big thing, and Wes already kind of touched on it a little bit, the big thing is you're painting something, if you want it to look real, is you want to build depth.
So just as a simple exercise, everybody can take a look at your inner wrist. You're going to notice that it's not just one color. You've got little bits, you can see your veins, there's little skin discolorations in there. You're not one color, and honestly, in nature, nothing is. And so we've got a couple of photos up here to where wood grains, there's discolorations, animals' furs, there's all, little gray flecks here and there.
And even in metals, nothing is just a flat, just silver. There's going to be, some copper tones in it a little bit, some gold tones in it a little bit, black tones in it a little bit. Nothing but machine manufactured plastic is ever truly just one color.
When it says you kind of step by step on that, colors I have on here, it's a base gold. Then I actually go over it with a watered down black. Because when that base gold is there, it's like nothing looks like that unless it's just, effective. So I will have it around watered down black over pretty much almost all of it. Except maybe
So, as we talk about some of these things, it's important to know that there are different kinds of paintbrushes out there. They're not all kind of one and the same. Wes talked already about using the foam brushes if you want a good smooth one. These fan type ones here on the end of the picture there, I use a ton of those because I love them to get little scratches and edge marks and things like that.
And the fan brushes, like you mentioned, they will pick up just the tiniest paint, and it's wonderful for just that tiny little anywhere. Another one that I'm very fond of are 45-degree angle brushes. I find it very useful when you're doing crevices. And then you get into your round and your flat brushes, which they're wonderful if you're trying to cover large areas. So as you're out getting your painting supplies, and you have the opportunity to get a good variety of stuff like that, I would always suggest doing so.
Okay, so a technique that I use a lot is dry brushing. I love to dry brush to get my metallic looks, and what I'll do is I'll start with a flat black base coat. And so like this armor here, this was all dry brush, and what I've done is you start with a flat black, and then you're going to take the rattiest, grossest paintbrush you've got. An old beat up chip brush works great. Get your paint on that, and then take and wipe that on paper towels to get, you're going to get almost all of the paint out of that. And then you're going to go over your piece with that, and it's going to just slowly build that color because it's putting very little paint on there to kind of look like it scratches up. And it helps to mix together those colors. So my dry brushing, what I generally do for something like this is I'll start off with a gunmetal, and I'll go through and coat the black in that gunmetal. You don't need to worry about the whole thing being covered, because there's going to be black showing through and things, but you want to cover it as best as you can with that. And then you're going to go in with some copper, maybe some gold, and then I'll go to a chrome, and then maybe back to some gunmetal, back to a silver, and as we just slowly build those colors up by mixing them, eventually the result is something that can make your foam look like it's real metal.
This is where our airbrush is really kind of handy as long as we have spray effects here. So I mentioned earlier about fur having different colors, and so we've got a Princess Mononoke airbrush that we did, and really could emulate that thing to where you probably in nature you never find your white wolf around. So we just took the ends of the fur with a little bit of gray, and then another coat of black, and got a very realistic type of effect to it.
And the other thing over here is spraying is also a great place. You can do it with dabbing paint on to an extent, but creating stencils. I know Rachel, you stencil.
Use stencils on foam for sure, but you can actually stencil fabric. This was originally a silver spandex, and I found the hexagon fabric in the size I wanted, and I personally airbrushed through it to get a really smooth surface to create my own custom fabric. You do want to heat set it if you can. Spandex you can set very well if you melt under an iron. Otherwise it will rub off. As you can see, like in the cases of my elbows, it adds one a little bit, but it gives it sort of a character, I find. But you can use stencils on many things. You can use logos to create patterns. Just if you want something that you can keep over and over, stencils and either brushing straight down. If you push to the sides in a stencil, you will see like the edges and then crisp pink lines. Or you can airbrush through it. It's a really great way to add texture.
And I find that I like to use acrylic because that works.
Yes, yes, I use acrylic. It flexes with fabric. Otherwise, it will just split off.
Brown and black, that's all it goes. And usually I'll kind of get something on there, brush on it, but I'll actually I use my hands a lot. I get rid of this and rub it in there because it looks like I rubbed it in there. Here, I did actually burn this, but once you burn it, it doesn't have to be dramatic enough to look to the corner. So I'll make sure to show it and then I outline it and you will see that much dramatic effect. After we do the coat of paint, I'll get it a little watered down like around, and I'll wash it. But the goats score really well. The color will pop on there. Split it a little bit, which is good for like the goats. So we make it up in lines and that whole really up. Great stuff.
Yeah, can we go back one?
All right, so I mentioned earlier that I really adore wood frames. So as you're painting things, you want to keep in mind the way, if you are going to be dealing with brush strokes, you want to keep in mind the way that they would go in nature. And so I've got a vertical up and down wood frame there. So as I was painting, I have to be careful that you're not going side to side, because your final product, those extra little brush marks, extra texture, you can get a really funny looking piece in the end.
Yeah, and so, and by going with the grain and things like that, it actually adds to it and makes it look more real, if you can keep up with those brush strokes.
Metals also sometimes have a grain, but if you're dry brushing the final look, you want to try to stay one direction because going across and out, because sometimes you have a grain.
And washes, this is what Wes was talking about earlier, with just watering down acrylic, painting it over the whole thing, and then wiping it back off. It's a great way to discolor things. And again, it helps to create depth in your piece to make it look more realistic.
Remember that early, take some black acrylic, like you get pieces as well. Put the water down. I have to place ratio. A little water down goes a long way. And then I'll take those sponge brushes because they can soak up a lot of it. And I have a big mat that I paint on because it will run off because it's essentially black water at that point. And I really get it all over it and then liquid it for about a minute, maybe 45 seconds. And then just take a bunch of paper towels. I wipe it off. I make sure to wipe off where there's a lot of highlight really well. In some areas, like in the crevices, I'll kind of just let it stay. Kind of like, okay, and it'll dry there, it'll darken those areas really well. Kind of create almost a shadow effect, like I let it get darker in here and kind of stay. And then after I've done my body wash, I do actually put black acrylic, not water it out, go in and actually paint some of those darker areas. I pretty much get everything, like all of this, except for like, don't take that color. But all the silver and all the gold and everything are pretty much just like wash.
This is supposed to look a little bit newer. She has come out of the bottle. You still want to get a lot of your edges with either a darker color of the same shade or a black white ones to get off. Because if you don't have a very flat looking piece, even if it's very dynamic in shape, it really makes those details pop, which is really important. You see
Now, hydro dipping is what we talked about. Like I said, there are films available. You can use spray paint and things like that. It's a good method if you want some, if you want to do like camo, or if you want to, get the hydro dipping films and things like carbon fiber and stuff, because those are very difficult to do by hand with the brush. It's possible, but it's extremely difficult. Whereas the hydro dipping, and foam works great with hydro dipping. Plastics work great, things like that. So all you've got to do is you just dissolve it, dip your piece through, and you're done. It saves you a lot of time and headache.
to that point with the carbon fiber, you can also wrap foam in fabric, glue it down, and it was great. Giant Fun had a carbon fiber fabric in her collection. Really nice because it's always stretch. And you can use barge or any sort of foam glue on your piece, and that's just wrap it around and then glue it in place, and then paint things involved, and it's great.
This leather, not leather, it's foam wrapped in leather. And it's actually really light brown, and I just like the brown stain and out the front.
One thing with weathering, and it's something that I think is important, is your weathering should tell a story. Think about what's going to happen to your piece. It's not just a random process that always happens. For example, I love rust. Rust is probably my favorite thing to paint. I use a lot of it. Is that as you're applying rust to things, you have to think about if this piece was left out, where would water pool? Where would this rust? Because it's not going to rust just everywhere. I mean, your big flat surfaces and things like that, they're not going to get near as much rust as something, down in these crevices or things like that where water's going to pool and set. And so think about how things would have happened, how your piece is going to react. different scratches and gouges and things like that. Think about what could have caused them and why would they be there. You want this all to tell a story. I'm going to drop that on the ground. You want your weathering to tell the story of your crop, not to just be kind of a random thing that's thrown in there.
For example, following up, you look at my footprint I'm wearing for community has essentially what I'm kind of treating as a bowling shop. You know, I wear armor for a reason. My heart's behind me. So that's specifically what I'm looking for. That's why most of the damage goes for that point, kind of making that angle. Once the still makes a little damage, prep it, heavier that way. But I can imagine, what would happen, what would be here, parts that are kind of more inclined. We see some damage. I don't put them weathering downside. So I kind of outer edges take a lot of weathering. This is a hand. You punch people with it. You grab things with it. I was very careful with setting weathering on the hand area because it see the most action. And then as the arm moves up, I can fade away a little bit. How heavy it is.
Edges are where you're going to see chips the most. Things that you brush up against there, that is where you really want to put like your silver scratches and stuff generally, especially for like white weathering, edges rather than in the center unless you imagine it. I usually put a few just in the thing that's great for your skin. But yeah, it's pretty important to think about like, what sort of combat or situations your character is in. It can really add
Was mentioned earlier about splashing mud on the bottom of his coat, but we put together a Samus Aran Metroid, and the game takes place in a swamp. So when we built the armor at the end of the deal, we put together a jar of what we called sludge. It was your bunch of browns and blacks, and just a gross muddy color. Then we took the biggest paintbrush that we could find and just flung mud at her lower legs for where she was running through that gross muddy water, and got her nasty.
This is actually from Volpin Props, who's kind of my hero when it comes to painting stuff. His book is by far the best I've ever read on the topic. But the way that he puts it is, was your piece meticulously cared for or abandoned in a crypt? If it were dropped, what would scratch and how? Would armored gloves mar the finish of it, or, and where and how frequently? So there again, just think about those kind